Hello and welcome to lesson 11 of 21 for 21. 21 lessons about sport and media in the 21st century. We got three different countries represented this week. So as always, I'm Stuart in Germany. We have Jamie in, of course, Barcelona as always. Hello, Jamie.
Hey, how we doing?
All good, thank
Episode
you.
11 already. We're
Yeah,
powering through.
getting through it. What was the bingo call for 11? Did you know?
Uh, two walking sticks.
Two walking sticks, 11, lesson 11.
And we're over halfway through our 21 episode challenge.
Yeah, going really well.
So
Um,
this week we want to introduce, finally, we've got a Twitch streamer on the podcast. We've talked about having a Twitch streamer on for a while, and it's finally happened. But actually, we're here. We brought Omar Hawash on for another reason. He founded his own independent news outlet all about FC Barcelona. We'll hear all about that in just a short moment's time. But first, let's introduce Omar Hawash, who is in Copenhagen.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
How are
Thank
you
you so
doing?
much.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just powering through everything. It's nice, and it's nice to come on here and be able to talk about it with you guys as well.
So I'm going to let Stuart go first because he wants to ask you, despite living in Copenhagen, why are you such a big Barca fan? Well,
Yeah,
that's the question. Sorry,
Yeah,
Stuart.
no, yes, it's good. I can see you've got the Messi 19 shirt up behind you, so that's certainly the original Messi shirt, I think. So, yeah,
Mhm.
was it the Messi factor that got you into Barcelona, or the Martin Brathwaite factor, or how's it?
No, it was long before Martin Brathwaite. For me, it was mostly the style of play that Barcelona had at the time, and everything about the club, the culture around the club, and everything. It was more those concepts that kind of got me into loving Barcelona as a club and as a team. I started following them, I want to say, fully around 2010, 2011. The earliest memory I have of a single goal would be the one where Messi in the semifinal of the Champions League just slides through the Madrid defense. Um, so yeah, quite early memories. The shirt there is more for vintage purposes. I didn't want to put a Messi 10 up there just so people wouldn't shed a tear every time. But with this one, it's a bit more of a legacy one.
Yeah, it shows a bit more
Um,
the heritage and the history you've got with the club.
exactly. So yeah, that's how I got into it. Really, it was beautiful football. The culture around the club was definitely palpable. Despite being thousands of kilometers away. So yeah.
Yeah, so going again back slightly more in time then. So
Mhm.
before this 2010 season, you weren't into football, or you just there's
Yeah,
no
that's it.
team yet that won your heart.
I wasn't really into football that much at the time. I was still growing up. I knew football existed. 12 years old. Wasn't really that much into sports as much. Like I would watch, World Cup in 2006. I remember, vaguely watching a game or two, in the Euros of '08. But that's it. Like that was my relation with football back then. Was very, it wasn't that I didn't have that close connection that I have to football now, obviously. But yeah, it started off as me kind of, oh, this seems interesting. This seems like an interesting sport, and it brings people together, which was kind of the main factor of it for me at the time. And then slowly I started, getting into the sport more and more.
So
So
was
you
that
went.
the one you were
Go
doing?
on. No. Go,
So was
Stuart.
that the traditional? So you maybe became the Barcelona fan. You gradually fell in love with the style of football. Then you were playing as them on FIFA and watching all the games, and you gradually built from there your love of
That's
the team.
that's in broad terms, that's what happened.
So you went from falling in love with them in 2010, you said, no, the 2010 season,
Mhm.
to then 8 years later in 2018, launching an independent news channel all about FC Barcelona, Blaugranagram, which has since
Yeah.
gone, from what I can tell, strength to strength. You've got 32,000 followers on Twitter.
Yeah.
You've kind of become a formal business entity there in Denmark. Uh, you also do some work with the club, so dream come true moment for you there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, but specifically with Blaugranagram, what was it just the love and the passion for Barca that you sort of went, you know what? I'm going to start my own news channel, because that's not the typical route, right? Normally people
That
are
is,
like,
yeah.
I'd love to work for the club, or I'd love to work for I don't know, whatever the BBC Sport equivalent is in Denmark,
Right.
and be the kind of the go-to guy for Barcelona. But you were like, no, I'm going to do this myself, and I'm doing it my way, and I'm going to create my own channel.
Yeah, it's funny actually. The way it started was a very unorthodox route. Even when I look back at it now in hindsight, it was still a very like I never imagined that it would reach this point 2-3 years in. What happened was in 2018. At the time, I was really into football, and I obviously still am. But at the time, I was like really getting into it from the like the discussion perspective, if you will. I was talking more about it with people, and at the time, I had a Twitter account, just a normal Twitter account, like any other Twitter account, and I was slowly like getting into talking about it on Twitter, about football on Twitter. And so my friends were like, "Man, you're spamming our timelines with football. Please just make a separate account. This is getting too much." And at the time, I was like, "All right, that's fair enough." So I started a Twitter account that was related to football. And as was the culture at the time, you would represent a player. So your profile picture would be a profile picture of a player that you support, and your Twitter handle would be some sort of spin-off on the player's name, and so on and so forth. And so at the time, I repped to this day, I don't think he was that popular for Barcelona. Denis Suarez is the guy I decided to rep at the time, and because of that, I got some strange attention because people were like, "Who would rep this guy?" Because he wasn't that popular at Barcelona at the time, and I think even back then and to this day, I think most of his popularity is in Galicia. So for that factor, it was kind of like a wow factor for people. Like, why are you repping this guy? And that sort of gave me some attention as well. And as I was gradually getting into just using Twitter as a platform to express my opinions and hear other people's opinions, I slowly realized there is no real news outlet on Twitter that reports anything about Barcelona. All the pages that were there, at least in my eyes, just copy pasted whatever anyone else said. Like they would just take from the main source, they would copy paste it, translate it into English using Google Translate or whatever automated feature, post it on there, and they would have like 80, 90,000 followers. And that's still the case to this day, that a lot of the pages are just like that. So for me, that was the thing that made me go, I want something different. I want something that has integrity, and I want something that people can look at and go, okay, well, if this person is saying it is true, he's not just using someone else's info and relaying it as his own. And so I started slowly reporting news about Barcelona. I sort of came up with a tier ranking system that since then has been adopted by a lot of these pages. They've just spinned it off. So they use like weather icons or any other icons to represent, like the closer it gets to sunny weather, the more reliable it is or whatever. My idea was that the bronze medal was like not really that reliable. Silver was probably reliable, and gold was like really reliable. And so
In terms of sources, you mean?
yes. So in terms of sources, it started off, the idea I took from a friend that had a page that was going at the time. And he was like, hey, you can, we're using this idea and you can obviously use it. So the idea back then was just ranking the sources. But then for me, that was an issue because a source can be it can really say something true one time and then get some wrong information the second time. And that affects the credibility of what's getting reported, but the source's credibility might not change. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to adapt this metal method, if you will, to change it to the point where it actually represents the news as a whole and not just the source. So it would actually, the metal was more about the report and the source put together more so than the source. So that whole thing that without sounding arrogant, that I sort of pioneered on Twitter has now since it's everywhere. Like if you look at any of the news pages on Twitter, they all use, not all, but a lot of them use that method. And for me, that was a thing that made me kind of stand out to people. They're like, oh, we haven't seen this before. This is different. He's ranking it. It's actually an analysis is being put into this. And as it kept growing, I started to realize, okay, this actually can go somewhere. Like this doesn't just have to be a Twitter account. It doesn't just have to be threads. So I started writing, I made my own website. I started putting articles on there from time to time. I branched out, made an Instagram account, a YouTube account. And then slowly I reached a point where, okay, I have this idea, and I can't do it all on my own. And at the time, still to this day, I still get people that, doubt me or throw hate or whatever. And that's just part of social media. But at the time, I posted news about, I believe it was Frankie de Jong before he signed for Barcelona. Info that I had gotten from one of my sources exclusively. And so a guy slid into my DMs and he was like, "No, you're lying. Why are you lying?" And it turned out to be true, obviously. But the fun thing is that now that same guy turned out to be a very good friend of mine. And now he's one of the key parts of Blaugranagram as a company.
Sorry, the source or the angry guy
No, the
sliding in
guy.
your DMs?
The guy that's in my DMs. So it just goes to show that things can really change from, depending on like how you are as a person. And I think part of why people felt this sort of close relation to Blaugranagram when it was a Twitter account, when I was reporting news every day, quoting the right news outlets and journalists and giving them proper credit and analyzing it in a certain way. Part of the likability that there was to that account, I think, was attached to how I was as a person. And I think for me, it's very important when you build a brand that there is a sort of face to the brand and that face is genuine. Because a lot of people, I think, on social media can come off as very, disingenuous, or they can come off as jerks, or they can come off as, way too nice to be real. And I think a lot of those connotations that comes with social media and comes with, the way people behave on social media are very important to how a brand is portrayed. And even to this day now, with 20, 30 people under my wing in Blaugranagram, people still view me as the face of Blaugranagram. Like, people actively tell me that. And so for me, I think the fact that I've been able to sort of retain that status, as much as it's to some extent sort of annoys me because I'm at a point now where, I've delegated a lot. If you look at the organization chart on our website, we have a lot of people in a lot of different roles and positions. And for me, I think those people are worthy of that credit, which sometimes I think mistakenly goes to me because people view me as the face of the company. But I think it's important to have that status in a company. It's important for someone to have that status in the company because it makes it more relatable, right? The reason why Facebook is relevant to this day, even though the generation that started using it, which was, our generation, maybe the generation slightly before or slightly after us, right? The reason why it's so relevant is because people attach it to Mark Zuckerberg as a person, and they see that as a funny thing, and that sort of keeps them relevant even in the, the meme community or whatever you want to call it, right? So having that face is important, and I think if you add the personal aspect to a brand, that helps it grow that much faster, and it helps it grow in a way that while you don't you don't become detachable from the company. The company will always, to some extent, symbolize, but it will always equal you to some extent for some people. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because then it goes both ways. So if you do something, like for me, I collaborate with Barcelona, that boosts Blaugranagram's credibility because they go, "Oh, the owner of this company actually works with the club." Whereas if something bad happens on Blaugranagram, it also influences me because then people go, "Well, first off, he's the CEO, but also he's the face of the company." So it's about being able to maintain that balance. I think that
Yes, sorry.
has helped it.
By company, you mean you're paying these guys, so you're getting your money from ad sources or from like affiliated links, or is it sort of like all of a volunteer network by company?
Right now, so Blaugranagram as an entity is registered as a formal company in the country. It is registered as a formal company. And right now, it is very much a passion project. So the income that I get from the company goes right back into the company, and the income mainly has, consisted of people buying merchandise, supporting the company. We have a shop on there. It's some of it has been through ad revenue, through Google AdSense and that kind of stuff. And we're slowly working on ways to sort of, monetize our content in a certain way. But
So
that's
you have a full. Sorry to interrupt you, but so you're doing all this with a full-time job, or this is your full-time job, Blaugrana, or what was your job that you've had to leave to dedicate yourself full-time to Blaugrana?
What's happened is I think for me it's all about organizing your time. And for me, like, I don't know if this will be in frame, but there's a whiteboard back there that I use to sort of organize everything. And so Blaugranagram is, time-wise, it's more of a side project to me because I have a lot of other things going on. Like I'm doing a master's degree. I've got 2 jobs at my uni. I've got I work with Barca as as a co-host on their Twitch as a collaborator, and I also have another job next to that. So for me, Bloggonogram technically is a side project, but it's something that I'm dedicating time to in a way that it's going to turn into a full-time project. It's going to turn into a full-time job at some point. But I'm dedicating time to it in a way that tasks are getting delegated in a way where the company's still going, even without me having to do a whole lot, because I've already done so much work building it up that now a lot of my work is administrative work, and a lot of my work is signing off on, hey, should we do this post, or should we write this article, or should we put this sentence in, or is it bad mouthing, and so on and so forth. So like I'm working 24 hours a day. I get messages from some of the people in the company at 2 a.m. asking me a question that they need a response to urgently. So in that sense, it's sort of full time because it's throughout the whole day, but it's not an 8 hour a day thing. It's more of like a couple of minutes every hour, or 2 hours one day and 0 hours the next day, or 4 hours one day. So that's sort of, it's a bit of a weird balance, but it works until now at least. So we'll have to wait and see.
You sound unbelievably busy. I lost count of how many jobs you're doing.
Yeah,
And I always thought I was busy, like with a full-time job and a podcast.
No, putting us out to shame, Jamie.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
That's not the
absolutely.
intention.
I mean, you only have to kind of dig a little bit, and you can see all the work that's gone into this. And I mean, you look at the follower count, and that's kind of like the basics, right? You go, oh
Right.
wow, he's built this network from the ground up, and he's got 32,000 followers on Twitter, which is something impressive on its own. But you have a bit of a click around the website, and it's so unbelievably up to date. You've got stuff in, I think, 4 languages.
We have stuff in English. We have stuff in Spanish. From time to time, we do have stuff in Catalan, but that's mainly like side
Right.
stuff, if that makes sense. But it's
Right.
mostly
Okay.
English and Spanish.
There's a podcast network where you've got various podcasts that kind of come under the Blaugranagram umbrella.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, good job.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, so the two podcasts, they're both our podcasts, but we've sort of made it a network to, first of all, streamline things a bit. Second of all, if any other podcast would like to come under the umbrella, thereby gaining exposure through us, they're free to inquire about that. But the podcast that we have right now, one of them is The Driven Shot, which I host alongside the company's COO, who's also a longtime editor at the company. So he's sort of been there for a while and he knows the ins and outs. And so me and him host that, and that's about Barcelona. It's in English. And both podcasts are streamed to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, in real time.
Okay, so you do it live.
Something for us
Live
to do
live.
then, Jamie.
Stuart and I just hide behind this safety net of recording it and then putting it out later.
The thing is, I used to do this. I used to do the safety net method, and it's really good. I think there are a lot of plus sides to it. But the thing for me is, with everything else going on in my life, the live method, kind of forces me to do it now because people are expecting it now. So it sort of adds a bit to the motivational factor of it that, well, people are expecting it, and also it gives you a bit of that. That feeling of intimacy with the viewers, because they can ask you in real time, they can react to what you're saying in real time, and vice versa, and it sort of helps you start a discussion, which is, I think, for me, that's been the plus side with the live part of it, is that it allows for more interaction in real time, although then your numbers on Spotify and stuff goes down because obviously people have watched it in real time, so why would they tune in again unless they didn't tune in the first time? So that's sort of the downside to it. But I think there are some pros and cons to both methods, and I fully get that. I fully understand why you guys like this method, because it allows for more versatility in terms of, if you want to add visuals, if something happens, if a slip up happens here and there, you can always rectify it.
Yeah. To the people listening, just we'll give you a bit of it, like show you how the sausage is made almost. Like we basically record it as if it's live. It doesn't go live, but and if needs be, we can stop or we can edit things and change things.
So I think, yeah, Omar, like you were saying, people are expecting it. So when we spoke with Matt, Jamie, a few weeks ago, and he said you've got to be consistent. So I guess it's you, Omar. You're doing your live broadcasts at the same time each week. You've built that fan base, and people are expecting it. And we've we do that with our publishing date. We always publish at the same time, so people do know how to look out for it. It's just with our various schedules that a full live has not yet been possible, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It allows you for a bit more flexibility because, let's say you plan on putting it out every Wednesday and you usually record on Sundays. Whoops, got busy this Sunday. Something came up, you record it Monday, get it out Wednesday anyway. So it allows for some flexibility. The other podcast is a Spanish one where we talk about Barça B and Barça Femení, and that's with one of our editors. The COO is in there as sort of like a kind of keeps he keeps things flowing, make sure that all the technical stuff is out the way. And so yeah, it's two of our editors and him, and that's so that way we cover all bases. So Barca's first team for the English fan base, Barça B and Femení for the Spanish fan base, and people can sort of congregate from both those, and it helps us get a bigger reach to both those communities. But yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had to, that I've come up against, I think there was a thing that I thought about here 2 minutes ago, and it slipped my mind. I'm sure it'll come back. But I think one of the biggest issues sort of has always been that, with Twitter, the issue is, and I hate to say this, but Twitter is a lazy platform. And when I say that, I think I'll lose some people. But when I say that, I'm saying with Twitter, people want to see everything in one place. That's the whole point of Twitter. People don't want to go to BBC and all those websites specifically to have to go in and see, okay, they wrote this, they wrote this, they wrote this. They want to see everything in one place. And the thing with Twitter is that they don't want to click links if they can avoid to. That's why, like, when you see a lot of posts where there are links, there's always, hey, no, the answer is this, saved you a click. That's the thing that's been around for years on Twitter and Facebook and all those platforms. And that was an issue I first faced when I started the website back in 2018, 2019, was that a lot of people were upset, not just not happy. They were genuinely upset that how dare you write what we want to hear or write this piece of news behind a place where we have to click. It's not like you don't even have to pay at all. It's not behind a paywall. It's just behind one click, but they didn't want to click. So you lose a lot of impressions that way. And that's the thing with Twitter that I think, in hindsight, maybe I would have done it a bit differently. Maybe I would have done it a bit more gradually. But that's probably the advice I can give to people looking to build their own brand is really analyze your demographic. That's what I did. And that's why I think Blogonogram has done so well, is that we know our demographic. We know what people want and how people want it. And that's why we're still doing so well, despite our Twitter mainly consisting of articles that we put on our website and we link to. But it's about knowing what your demographic wants and what types of news your demographic wants to read there and what type of news are worth putting in on the website behind a link. So, the issue I had was there were genuinely people going into my DMs and writing, stop trying to be better, like stop trying to improve. Why are you branching out? Stay on Twitter. We want to see the threads. We don't want the articles. So it's really about finding that balance and thinking, okay, well, people on this platform only want this. They only want posts. So on Twitter, what we've done is some of the things we post are not articles. If it's like some small piece of news that's like somewhat urgent, we'll just post it as a tweet and post it on Instagram, and then we'll follow it up with an article if need be, and that way we'll please both sides of the crowd. So it's really about figuring out what your demographic wants and how you can best deliver it to them, and then going from there.
So you mentioned that. So has that sort of been balanced out over time? So those people who were angry at the start, they've either accepted your new method, or they've even stopped following you, would you say? Or is it hard to directly track?
No, well, yeah, we've sort of balanced it out, I'd say. I mean, we have lost some followers along the way, but I think that's the thing I think with social media is that a lot of the time you don't realize why people follow you until you start, we basically, Blogonogram pivoted. That's what happened. We pivoted from, I just had a Twitter page. It was a Twitter page and that's all it was. And everything was on Twitter and people referred to it as a Twitter feed, which I wasn't really happy with at the time, hence the change, right? So that sort of also drove me to try and go down a more professional route with it. But if people are happy with just being a Twitter feed, that's fine. They know their audience and they know that that's what they want. And if that's something that they can wake up to every morning and be happy about, then all power to them. That, you should look at what you want to do, what you really want to wake up to every day and say, okay, is this something I want to do when it comes to a brand? Is this going to be my brand? If so, then fine, do it and just go all in. And when you want to try and pivot, like I did with, making a website and getting things on the website and linking to articles instead of having everything there on twitter.com, you'll lose some people. And that only then you will realize, okay, these people were here for a specific reason. And now I know they'll go elsewhere for it. And that's okay, because this is my vision with what I'm trying to achieve. And it's also part of it is also accepting that. Because I think for me, at first I was sort of like taken aback. I was like, why are we losing X amount of followers in like X amount of days? It's kind of, it hits you. And then after a while it dawned on me. I was like, okay, so we pivoted. I can see that the impressions on these types of links are going down, or these types of posts aren't doing as well. And then you balance it out by making more interactive posts on the other side, right? So instead of instead of the Twitter page being just news, then you link to articles that are news and you post some news, but you also post some interactive stuff to boost the more social side of your social media account, if you will. So I think that was the challenge for me, but I think we've managed to balance it out quite well.
I mean, the algorithm sorry, Stuart, the algorithm kind of plays into that as well, right?
Right.
Like Twitter want their users to stay on Twitter. They don't want their users to go into the Blaugranagram or anywhere else.
Right.
And so you learn to kind of play the system there a little bit as well, and appease
Absolutely.
your fans at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like you've learned so much in 2018 isn't that long ago, really, and
No.
what you've built in that time and what you've learned is huge. I'm not sure what Stuart was going to ask, but I was going to sort of say one of the things that I often talk about, and we've spoken about it on the podcast, and we spoke about it a few weeks back with Tom Carter, I think is that quite often when we talk about people that wanting to get into sport media and work in sport media, one of the things I say first is that you need to start making content, you need to start making stuff. And that's pretty much exactly what you did. And that's what the people that you've got volunteering on Blaugranagram are doing. They've got this platform where they're able to create a portfolio of content. They're able to gain work experience. They're able to come out the other end. And should they apply for a job wherever, BBC Sport or wherever else, they can say, look, this is the stuff that I'm doing. Here is my writing. Here is what I've been doing on my own free time, off my own back. And I think that's a way of getting noticed, and certainly you've gotten noticed by doing exactly that.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, as well as I think Blaugranagram now has reached a point sort of where it is recognized as like people when you say the name, people sort of in some instances they know exactly what it is, and in other instances they've heard the name, right? And for me that's important to be able to build a name that a brand with a name that's sort of rolls off the tongue a little bit. It's still a tongue twister for many, but when you get the context of it,
I like the name.
Yeah,
but maybe that's because I've got that Barca knowledge as well about Blaugrana, and
I think when you know what Blaugrana is, that's obviously your target market. Omar is people who know what it is. So
yeah, exactly. So that was sort of the route I wanted to go down. And actually, one of the early fans of Blaugranagram, the Twitter page, actually came up with that name. Because at the time I wanted to branch out and get a more general name, and I asked around, and she texted me. And she went, "Hey, try this," and I was like, "Oh, that rolls off the tongue. I like that." And that's the thing with Blaugranagram is that the name, if people know the context, it rolls off the tongue. If they don't, it's sort of something that, oh, okay, that sounds clever. I know Instagram, so so it's always easy to make somewhat of a connection to it, and I think that's important, having that sort of visibility based off of other things, and then being able to tie those things up into something that's a bit more tangible. With Blaugranagram, I think for people that have been on the project and that have been involved in Blaugranagram, a lot of them have told me that them being there either because they're working for me or because they're working in media or because they're covering the club of their dreams is a dream come true. I've had people tell me that working for the company is a dream come true to them, and that's the biggest compliment I can get. It doesn't get any bigger than that you're helping people live out their dreams. Some of them want to be here for, for the next 5 years because they see that this is going somewhere, and they envision as well that it's going to be something that maybe in a few years will have an office and be have a steady source of income and so on and so forth. So there is that part of it, and then there are others that have been honest and said, well, I'm looking to use this because I'm looking to be a part of this as part of my internship. We've had people from universities. We actually have one right now. We had one recently, and we had one before that for internship programs at their universities come to me and go, hey, listen, can we be part of this? And the reason why I'm not reluctant at all is because, first of all, this is experience for them. So this is experience that they can use. If they're really good and if they fit what I'm looking for in the company, they can also join the company afterwards. And if they don't, then they'll leave because that's the end of the internship. So there's no risk involved there. And it's also me getting the company's name out there. If universities know that, oh, this company exists, they've had successful internships with our students before, the CEO or whoever we've been in contact with has been really responsive, so on and so forth. That means that later, when they're telling students, these are the places where you can go and have an internship for, they'll mention us, or at least they'll maybe name drop us here or there, and that way the knowledge of the people have of us will grow and our name will grow. So it's all about trying to build that reputation as well and playing off the cards you got. And if you continue to do that, I think that'll help you build your brand. And for me, I still see Bloganogram as a work in progress. I don't think we have not reached the goal that I've set for it yet, and my goals continue to grow, as does the company. So I think it's about setting goals. I think it's about really, asking yourself what you want from this, when you come out of the other end, what do you want to have? Should it be something tangible? Should it be money? Should it be, exposure? And sort of building off of that. And then when you get people to join your project or your company or your brand, they know what they're coming into. So it's not just hey, maybe you'll get this, maybe you'll get that sort of deal,
So what sort of challenges are there, or because you're doing Blaugranagram for Barcelona, so one of the biggest clubs in the world, so you've got a huge source of followers, but also you've probably got more competition from other fan media.
Right.
So which sort of specific challenges or lessons could you give to someone wanting to do what you've done, but for a far smaller team, Leicester City, for example? What?
Hey, careful with Leicester City.
I'm just joking, but the point stands. So what is specifically good about you, or what is just taking advantage of an existing large follower base?
Right. No, I think that's an excellent question. I think for me, early on when I first started, I saw a lot of the pages on Twitter as competition because people don't really distinguish between analysis and between copy paste. And I'm gonna sound really ticked off here, but what I'm trying to say is when it comes to pages on Twitter and on Facebook and all that, of which there are a lot of them will either just blatantly copy paste other sources info and then just credit the source, and then that's it, and you'll have 5, 6, 7 of those per club. And so in that case, yes, there's competition. So it's about standing out and seeing, is that what you want to do? Because that's what a lot of people go into. That's what a lot of people start doing, is they'll start saying, okay, I like this club a lot. I want to have a page with X thousand amount of followers for this club, from this club, and sort of using that sort of relationship that people have with the club, that sort of, oh, I love this club. This club gives me happiness and joy. I want to know what's going on around the club. And so they'll just use that, and then they'll make some Twitter page or whatever, or Facebook page, and they'll brand it off as some spin-off of the club's name, right? Which in itself isn't a bad idea at all. But I think it's really about standing out. I think that's the key point, because a lot of the pages will do the exact same thing, just with a different profile picture, a different banner, a different name. And if you look at what they're doing, it's pretty much the same thing all across the board. And so if you do that, you're not going to stand out. So I think, first of all, what you have to do is you have to analyze the market. You have to see, for the average follower on platform X for this club, let's say Leicester City or Crystal Palace, who is, what do they follow, right? So do they follow this page? All right, they follow this page and this page usually. These two pages have 90,000 followers combined or 70,000 followers combined, right? So a lot of these fans from this club go to those two pages. Do those two pages do the exact same thing? All right, well, I'll have to do something else, right? What do I want to do specifically, and what can I add is the main question here. What can I add to this fan base that isn't already there? And as soon as you find something that you can add, the next question becomes, how do I do it? How do I stand out? And how do I still manage to sort of entice the followers that follow these other pages to follow me because I provide something different, right? So I think it's about sort of seeing what the others have done, even if it's the most basic of things, even if it's using hashtags or using certain colors in certain photos or certain formats, and sort of seeing how you can adopt those, obviously without copying from them, but how you can sort of adopt some of those ideas into what you're trying to build, and then trying to use that to entice the same group of followers that they have to try and follow you as well. So I think it's really about knowing your market and knowing what your potential audience is, and then working from that rather than working the other way around with, I want to start something and then going from there.
And all that time, you've got to be careful to be reliable and build trust. And
absolutely.
And I mean, well, maybe not. Maybe that's another option, which is the one that
is another
I think
option.
We could do a whole podcast about clickbait and going down that route. But certainly that seems to be, from everything you've told us, from everything I've seen on your website, and from following you, and everything you've told us on the podcast today, like this kind of reliability and building trust seems to be kind of one of the core values and the key things that you kind of try to emit from this website.
Absolutely. Integrity, I think, is one of the most important things as well. If people know you have integrity, they know that you're trusted. Even if you mess up, they know, okay, well, he has integrity. He's not just going to do this to, get X amount of followers. And as well as the fact that if you wind up promoting something, right, if you strike a deal with some small company or with whatever, like, those kit giveaways that people do on social media, a lot of the reason why people fall into those kit giveaways is because they trust the face behind. So if they know that face behind has integrity, and they know that they can trust this face behind whatever page it is, that gives you that much more of an incentive as a follower to support whatever endeavor that this person is about to go on, whether that's a giveaway, whether that's a sponsorship, whatever that is. And it helps increase the support and the trust that people have in your brand. So I think it is about the personal touch, which for some have been neglected, and yet it still works out. So again, it's all about the approach, and there are many approaches to take, but that's the one that's worked for me.
Maybe that's quite a nice seg as well into, I wanted to ask you, and I'm quite aware of the time, and we spoke about this in episode with Tom, was it episode 8?
Yeah.
He talked about networking and getting into contact with people, and that is something, Omar, that you've been very hot on. Very, you're a known person. You say you're the face of Blaugranagram, and people think of Blaugranagram, they think of you, or they see you and they think of Blaugranagram. But it's true that, maybe Stuart isn't aware, but in the world of Barcelona, you're a known person, and it was you that approached me, and that's how we got to know each other and started the conversation whereby later I could come to you and say, hey, be on our podcast. But certainly you're kind of like this notorious networker, in addition to everything else you're doing, in addition to all the content you're creating and the platform you're building. And was that a conscious sort of effort, or was that something that you set out to do, or was it kind of just how you are, or what?
I think it's a bit twofold, I think, the answer, because part of it is, yes, I'm a very social person. I consider myself quite an extrovert, so I will naturally seek out positions where I can talk to people and get to know people. But I also think part of it was a conscious effort, because I figured I want to get myself out there for future opportunities. I want to get myself out there to promote my company, and also when you see a lot of people and you go, oh, okay, this person seems like they could be useful for X and Y and Z, and this person seems like a nice person from previous posts they've made or whatever, or this person has a really good reputation for this specific thing. So it was a very conscious effort, but it was 4 different motives for each person. So it's not just, oh, I'll just spam click connect on LinkedIn, or I'll spam click follow until I get a follow back. It's more of a conscious effort. And I think it's also about knowing why you network with people. Because a lot of the times on LinkedIn, people tend to connect with someone, the person will accept, and then that's it. That's the end of conversation. And they can say, oh, I have 790 connections. It's like, yeah, but what are you using it for? So for me, it was a conscious effort, but it was also because that's who I am as a person. I would like to have all my cards open, because then later on I can go, hey, listen, I know you're really good at this specific thing. We're looking for this specific thing in our company. Could you maybe be of assistance, or do you know someone who could? And it's that way branching out. So you keep your opportunities at all times just open, and you keep being able to, oh, on top of that, you can also just connect with people and network and make new friends and all that, and learn new things about yourself and learn new things about others. So it's a twofold answer.
Nice.
And yeah,
Okay.
it's sort of just what you're sort of doing, Omar, is you probably are more connected with Barcelona and the wider Barcelona community than I guess a lot of people who actually live in Barcelona. So I guess what I was wondering
Maybe.
is it something, is it an ambition of yours once you finish your studies to move to Barcelona, or do you sort of see yourself in the generation of fans who, because all your interaction with the club is predominantly online, you don't need to be in the same city or the same country as the team?
No, I would love to move to Barcelona at some point. Right now I have a lot of commitments here, which is why I haven't sought the opportunity to do that yet. But it is definitely something that I'm thinking of doing in the future. And yeah, I think it's something that I think a lot of people would like to do as well. I think it's quite a common objective for people to do that. And I think with everything going on with Bargonogram and with all that, it's sort of setting me up to at some point be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to move to Barcelona, or I'm going to do this or do that. So it's in there. It's in there.
I can recommend it. It worked out well for me.
I can tell.
Yeah. Um, the theme of the podcast is 21 lessons in 21 episodes. If you could just pick one lesson from everything you've learned since you started Blaugranagram, and I mean,
Mhm.
you've spoken about so much already, but if there's like one key thing, one takeaway in all this time that you think is just the absolute most important thing that our listeners need to hear, I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
Right.
What would it be?
I think it's know why you're going into making a brand. If you're making a brand, know why you're going into it, who your audience is going to be, and what you want to get out of it. So the why you're getting into it could be, hey, I love the club. That, let's say, a West Ham or a Crystal Palace. I love the club, and I want to be out there. I want to create content. Who are you doing this for? Know who your audience is, know what the audience wants, and how you can cater to that without straying away from what you actually want. So in that point, integrity and knowing yourself. And then the third thing would be, what do you want out of it? Do you want money? Do you want exposure? Do you want, So if I had to say a lesson, this is going to sound really corny and really cliche, but I'd probably have to say, know yourself before you get to know, others, and before you get to know what you're trying to build. Know yourself and know what you want, and then go from there. Because that's the mistake I think a lot of people make, is that they don't know themselves well enough to know what they want from something. And that's why a lot of passion projects get abandoned very early on, because they realize, oh, this takes time, or oh, this costs money, or it takes this or that out of me, and that's something I don't want to commit to. So if you know yourself, you avoid that pitfall, and you can build towards whatever goal you're trying to achieve.
Any words for anyone that's maybe in a position where they're in a passion project? They're maybe you, not in 2018, but in 2019, maybe a year in, or even 6 weeks in, I don't know, or 6 years in, and they're kind of like starting to feel beaten down by it, or
Right.
they're struggling, to keep going with it. They're not seeing the vision anymore. What, any words of advice on them based on what you've lived?
I would say try and really map out the things that have gone well for you so far. Try and map out the small successes that you've had so far, and map out the failures, and see why did I succeed in this thing. So that might be something like interaction. let's say you don't have a lot of followers. That would, in your situation, that would be maybe considered a bit of a failure, the way you're seeing things based on your vision. The success could be you've had a lot of interaction. Okay, why do I have a lot of interaction? Maybe that's because people relate to me as a person. Fine, that's another success. And then that's the thing I can work on improving and work on enhancing even more, this feeling of belonging to the brand and people being able to associate me with the brand. For instance, the failure could be I'm not getting followers. All right, what am I doing wrong? Is it the formats? Is it the photos I'm using? Is it the timing? Maybe my audience is predominantly in a time zone where I'm not. And so that means that whenever they see my post, it's 4 a.m. for them. So I'm not getting the same reach that I would get if I was posting it at 11 a.m. So I'd say the advice from me would be, map out your successes and your failures. See what's going well for your successes, because that motivates you. That motivates you. Seeing what is going well and why it's going well. And then on the other side of it, seeing what's going wrong, why is it going wrong, analyze it from there, while still seeing if something that didn't go well for you maps out well with something that went right. You can sort of tie those things together and say, okay, well, this specific thing, followers, isn't going too well, but the 50 followers I have are really interactive. I only have 50, but they're really interactive. Okay, how can I make them more interactive? How can I entice them to share my content? How can I, get likes or retweets or whatever to help my content get out to more people? So that would be my advice. Just keep going at it, keep tracking what's going well for you. Every success is success, small or big. It's still success that's going for you, and keep that as a motivational factor for you, is what I would say. That's what's helped me and a lot of other people, I imagine.
Great. Well, thanks very much. It's been really interesting because your advice, it wasn't something technical. It was just, something that might be common sense. Know yourself and know your industry, know what you're trying to do. So I think that's ideal. So if we before we go, if we get you back on in a year from now, if we're still going, what would happen with Blog Underground in a year from now? How do you see the next year going? What would be a good year?
A good year for me would probably be to just, for us to keep going in the same vein, for our name to continue to grow, for the Spanish section of our followers to continue to grow. I think we've manifested ourselves quite well amongst the English following of Barcelona, or the English speaking following, and we want to sort of do that for the Spanish one as well. And that's sort of what we're working on now. And that's something that I think if we had done that within a year, I'd be very, very happy. And then obviously just keep going, making it a steady source of income to some extent. So the expenses wouldn't have to come out of my pocket, but rather out of the company's earnings itself. So it's sort of just a self-feeding cycle. So yeah, those would be my goals for the year. And we'll have to see how we're doing a year from now. It's gonna be interesting to see if those are achieved or not.
Those are good goals. Those are good goals. I hope we get you back on again.
I'd love to.
Maybe even sooner, because I feel like we could go down one of several different rabbit holes. We've talked about kind of engagement and fan engagement on social media. Talked about podcasting and the podcast network. There's a wealth of things we could have spoken further about. Twitch streaming.
Oh yeah, we didn't even
cover that. No.
Well, there you go. There's the topic for round 2, Omar. Hey, thank you very much for finding time, because you sound like the busiest man, at least in Denmark, if not in a wider region.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I hope my advice didn't sound too corny or cliche to some of you. I know that, that might be the case sometimes. I tried to not make it too technical because I figured it might appeal to more people. Because I think that's where a lot of people get lost, is in the small details, and it just gets too not relatable to them. And that's what I sort of want to try and avoid when it comes to stuff like this.
No, I think you did that perfectly. So we'll stay tuned for a future episode of 21 for 21, where we actually finally talk to a Twitch streamer about Twitch. Yeah.
I'd love
Before we go, Omar, obviously bloganagram.com is your baby, and anyone that's listening that's interested, you could give that a visit. Anything else you want to plug? Where can we find you?
I'm everywhere. That sounds so arrogant. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram. It's Omar Hawash, so my full name, BG. BG stands for Blog Anagram. So twitter.com/Omar Hawash BG. On Instagram, I stream on Twitch. I've started streaming on Twitch on my own. And you can also currently find me on FC Barcelona's Twitch for matchday coverage. So yeah, I think that's about it, really. I think that's the places you can find me. And if you have any questions, if you want any advice, if you just want to chat, you can hit me up on those, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
Stuart, do you want to see us out?
Yeah, so that's been, again, I'll be following all of those accounts, the ones that I don't already follow, because Omar, you've been a fantastic guest. So much more to learn and share from you. And yeah, for 2020, 21 for 21, we're on the same places. 21 for 21 Sport Media. Like and subscribe, and have a nice evening. Thank you.